Why was everyone ignoring her at the range? Yet something in their fate would soon hinge on her unseen hands. The morning sun stretched long shadows across Naval Base, the concrete shooting lanes still cool from the ocean breeze. The sharp crack of rifles cut through the dawn. Each report felt crisp, disciplined, final. SEAL Team 8 moved like a living machine, their breathing and trigger squeezes timed to a silent rhythm only they understood. Commander Jack Iron paced behind them, expression carved in granite, scanning every detail with the calm severity of a man who had seen too much to waste words. He corrected a marksman's breathing with a single sentence, his voice steady as if speaking about the weather. At the far end of the range, a slender woman bent quietly to collect spent brass. Her name was Sarah Miller, maintenance specialist. 2 years on the job. To them she was nearly invisible, just the woman who swept up their shells, replaced their targets, made sure the machinery kept turning. She preferred it that way. When operators passed by, they rarely remembered her face an hour later, but her eyes missed nothing. She watched the team's primary sniper shift his weight between shots, had just corrected his breathing, but Sarah saw what he didn't mention, the angle of his elbow, the way it twisted his shoulder under tension. That flaw would pull his fifth shot wide just as surely as wind or gravity. She swallowed the urge to speak. Years of her grandfather's lessons whispered in her mind. A ghost waits. A ghost watches. A voice broke the air. Miller, Chief gestured at a distant target, replace the 300-meter boards. Right away, sir, she said softly. He barely nodded. She rolled fresh targets onto her cart, hands steady though her mind drifted to frost-covered mornings in Montana. 11 years old, lying prone in the grass. Her grandfather's old Remington tucked against her shoulder, his weathered hands guiding hers. Breathe, little ghost. The rifle is just a tool. Your mind is the weapon. His voice had been quiet, certain. Ghost I. Miller, the name whispered among rangers. A man who had seen the inside of missions that never officially existed. And now only she carried his methods forward, hidden behind a maintenance badge. That memory warmed her chest and stung at the same time. She had tried, once, to bring those skills into uniform. Perfect scores on tests, flawless fitness assessments. But doors stayed closed, polite smiles masking an unspoken verdict. Not for someone like you. So she had taken this job, watching from the shadows of the very world she had trained for. By mid-morning, pulsed with routine. Rifles cracked, brass clattered. The Pacific wind carried salt and jet noise. Sarah's hands worked automatically, targets, tools, calibration checks. But her mind stayed alert, tracing patterns in bullet groupings, remembering ghost eyes drills, little invisible threads connecting her to a past that still whispered. She was collecting casings when Commander voice carried over the gunfire. You're dropping shots at 7 o'clock, adjust windage. Sarah glanced at the target camera feed on a nearby screen. That wasn't windage. Her grandfather had shown her that exact pattern once on the ranch. It was a posture issue. She hesitated. Would they even listen? Her pulse quickened. The crackle of the base radio interrupted her thoughts, a murmur about unusual movement near the eastern access road. She felt a subtle shift in the air, instinct honed by years of ghost eyes lessons. Something about the tone, it wasn't routine. Minutes later, shouted for fresh boards at the 1,000-yard line. Sarah walked the length of the range, boots crunching gravel, her mind tugged between caution and duty. She replaced the targets, bent to secure a post, and froze. Across the distant tree line movement, too coordinated, too many at once. Her heartbeat quickened. Then an explosion. The ground shook under her knees. Black smoke surged skyward from the administrative building. A shock wave rippled across the range. His voice snapped through the radio. Contact, contact. Gunfire erupted from the trees. Dust kicked up around the seals as rounds tore into concrete barriers. Take cover, command cut through the chaos. The team reacted with drilled precision, diving behind barriers, returning fire in controlled bursts. But the enemy's positioning was surgical. Northern ridge, eastern perimeter, and Sarah's eyes widened. A drainage culvert behind them. 3 armed figures slipped through it, moving to flank the SEALs from the rear. Her grandfather's voice whispered again, "Don't wait for permission when lives depend on action." Sarah sprinted to the small arms locker, hands shaking but sure. Her maintenance keys slid into the lock. Inside, a modified M110 sniper rifle prepared for demonstrations, 2 magazines of 7.62. She slung it across her back, heart pounding but strangely calm. She crawled behind an equipment crate sighted through the scope. 300 yards, slow-moving targets, lead by half a body width. Breathe in 4, hold 2, exhale 4, hold, squeeze. The rifle bucked gently, suppressed report barely audible. The first man dropped. 2 more. 15 seconds, 3 bodies in the dust. She didn't stop, adjusted the optic. Northern ridge 600 yards uphill, cosine angle correction, wind 8 miles per hour west. She exhaled, squeezed, watched a hostile fold. Then another, and another. Her breathing was steady now, her world narrowed to reticle, target, trigger. Down on the range, blinked through the dust. Someone's taking them out, precision fire. Scanned, must be QRF advance elements. But doubt edged his voice. The shots were too deliberate, too perfect. Caught a glimpse. "Sir, that's Miller." Disbelief colored his tone. Through the haze, finally saw her. The maintenance girl moving between cover positions like she'd been born to it, the M110 an extension of her body. "Covering fire on my mark," barked into his radio, a quick decision already forming. "Miller, can you hear me?" A pause, then her voice, calm, professional. "This is Miller. Go ahead, Commander. Provide suppression on the east perimeter. We're bounding toward the weapons facility." "Affirmative. Ready on your mark." The next seconds blurred, her shots controlled and intentional, their movements synchronized under her protection. Felt the surreal weight of it, his SEAL team advancing because a civilian had chosen to step out of the shadows. Mid-stride, a machine gunner appeared on a rooftop, swinging into position. Stomach dropped too late, but before the weapon fired, the gunner jerked backward, a single suppressed crack echoing across the range. Glanced. 700 yards away, Sarah lowered her rifle. The man toppled, weapon clattering silent on concrete. They reached the weapons facility. Doors breached. Security personnel down. Rooms cleared. The data center saved. But thoughts weren't on the servers, they were on the quiet woman who had just altered every calculation about this fight. When he finally approached her at the range, she was calmly clearing the rifle, movements precise, face unreadable. Dust and smoke painted the horizon. Her pulse was still quick, but her hands were steady as stone. "Miller," said quietly, "you owe us an explanation." She met his gaze, not defiant, not apologetic, simply steady. "Yes, sir, I suppose I do." The distant wail of sirens grew louder. Base security, emergency vehicles, QRF finally arriving. Around them, SEAL Team 8 stole glances at the maintenance specialist who had just saved them, their expressions shifting from shock to awe to a quiet, uneasy respect. But Sarah barely noticed. Her thoughts were elsewhere, on a frost-covered Montana morning long ago, on her grandfather's words about ghosts and waiting, and on the realization that the life she had built, silent, invisible, safe, had been shattered with a single decision. The world would look at her differently now, and that terrified her more than the gunfire ever had. How could a simple maintenance girl's aim be sharper than a SEAL's? Yet she seemed almost afraid of being seen. The base was still in chaos, the acrid smell of cordite and burning fuel drifting on the ocean breeze. Sirens wailed across, mixing with the barked orders of security teams converging on the range. Sarah Miller stood near the equipment shed, the M110 cleared and cased, her palms faintly trembling despite her expressionless face. Commander approached, his boots crunching over shattered brass. He was silent at first, watching her secure the rifle with the precision of a professional armorer. His team had been saved, but what he'd witnessed left him unsettled. "Miller," he said quietly. She straightened. "Sir." You just performed under fire like someone who's been there before." His voice held no accusation, only controlled curiosity. "That wasn't luck." Sarah kept her gaze level. "I did what needed to be done." Studied her a beat longer, then nodded. "Stay put." He turned to and perimeter security until QRF takes over. But as he walked toward the command center, his mind was racing. Her calm voice on the radio, the perfect shot that had saved his men. Ghost I. Miller. The name slid unbidden into his memory, a legend whispered in Ranger lore. Sarah watched the SEALs regroup. Their glances flicked toward her now, no longer dismissive but sharp with curiosity. The anonymity she'd guarded for years had evaporated in the smoke. She felt exposed, a quiet dread blooming beneath her ribs. "Grandpa warned me. Once they see you, you can't go back to being a ghost." Hours blurred. Statements taken, wounded evacuated, debris smoldering. Sarah found herself sitting alone in a small maintenance office, her coffee long cold. She replayed the firefight in her head, the way her body had moved without conscious thought, her grandfather's teachings guiding her hands. The adrenaline crash left her hollow, fragile. A whisper of guilt threaded through her relief. She had killed 3 men in the culvert, others on the ridge. She'd saved lives, yes, but the reality was stark. The door creaked. Commander entered, his face unreadable. He took the seat across from her. "How are you holding up?" She hesitated, the expected answer, "I'm fine," stuck in her throat. "I don't know," she admitted. He nodded once as if respecting her honesty. "It's different when it's real. My first firefight, I remember the quiet afterward more than the shots." His tone softened slightly. "You saved my men, saved this base." Her eyes flickered to the floor. "I didn't plan to reveal myself like that." Leaned forward. "Who taught you to shoot like that?" She reached into her pocket, fingers brushing the worn photograph she always carried. She handed it to him. A younger Sarah stood beside a grizzled man with a weathered smile, both holding rifles on a mountain ridge. "James Miller," she said. "My grandfather, Rangers, they called him Ghost Eye." Recognition flickered in eyes. "Ghost Eye Miller," he murmured. "He was on the Eagle Falls team." Sarah blinked. You know that code name." He nodded slowly. Every serious operator's heard the stories. Before she could press further, a radio crackled outside. A base security officer leaned in. "Commander, Captain Westfield needs you in the command center immediately." Stood, handing the photograph back. "Stay here, Miller. Don't leave the building." But she couldn't sit still. Through the small window, she watched emergency vehicles stream toward the eastern gate. The range, her quiet refuge, looked like a battlefield. Something about the attack didn't fit. These weren't random extremists. Their movements had been coordinated, their timing perfect. Her phone buzzed, a text from her supervisor. No words, just 500 again tomorrow. As if today hadn't cracked the world open. She almost laughed, but the sound stuck in her throat. Minutes later, returned, tension etched into his features. "Base command needs to debrief you." Sarah's pulse jumped. "I'm not under arrest." His voice was calm but firm. "No, but you're now a critical witness and an asset." He hesitated, then added, "The attackers knew the base layout. They targeted the data center, and one of them carried a military ID from a man officially dead for 30 years. She frowned. "Who?" "Captain Frank Wilson, Special Forces. Reported KIA in Somalia, 1993. The name meant nothing to her, but expression carried weight she couldn't yet grasp. The command center was a hive of controlled urgency. Screens glowed with satellite feeds and security footage. Officers clustered around tactical maps. Sarah felt every eye follow her as escorted her inside. Captain Westfield, a stern, broad-shouldered man, acknowledged her with a clipped nod. "Ms. Miller, your actions saved lives today." "I did what I had to, sir." Westfield gestured to a chair at a briefing table. Beside him stood a gray-suited man with an FBI badge, Agent Thomas, and a weary-looking colonel with the insignia of the Defense Intelligence Agency. "This is Colonel," Westfield said. The colonel's gaze was sharp, searching. His gravelly voice cut through the room. "Your grandfather, he was Eagle Falls, wasn't he?" Sarah blinked. "I only know the name. Grandpa didn't talk about specifics." Agent Thomas slid a photograph across the table. 6 men beside a Huey in 1982. Her grandfather stood second from the left, smiling faintly. Next to him, a man whose arm draped over his shoulder with easy familiarity. "That's Captain Wilson," said. "Officially dead, yet today his ID showed up on a mercenary attacking this base." Sarah traced the photo's edges with her fingers. The casual closeness between Ghost Eye and Wilson stirred an ache of loss and a flicker of doubt. Had her grandfather been hiding more than she knew? His tone hardened. "Do you have any of your grandfather's records, journals, operational notes?" Her stomach tightened. She thought of the wooden box hidden in her apartment floor. He kept a journal. Thomas leaned in. "We need to examine it immediately. It could explain why today happened." Sarah hesitated, protective instincts flaring. That journal was her grandfather's voice, his memories, his warnings. Handing it over to strangers felt like betrayal. She glanced at. His expression was steady, reassuring. "Let me accompany her to retrieve it," suggested. "She can help interpret anything we find." Westfield considered, then nodded. "Do it. And Miller, this isn't optional. National security is at stake." The drive to her apartment was tense. The city blurred past in streaks of neon and shadow. Sarah's hands tightened around the backpack in her lap, finally spoke. "What else did your grandfather teach you, beyond shooting?" She hesitated. "Fieldcraft, surveillance, escape routes. He said knowledge was insurance." Mouth twitched, half a smile, half a grimace. He wasn't wrong. As they neared her building, a prickling sensation crawled up her spine. Her grandfather's old warning echoed, "Trust your instincts. They'll feel the threat before your eyes see it." She straightened in her seat. "Something's wrong," she said quietly. Slowed, "What do you see?" "Not see, feel. My lights are on. I turned them off this morning." He circled the block instead of pulling in. Thomas, in the back seat, was already on the phone, summoning discreet backup. Parked in a shadowed lot, scanning the apartment complex with binoculars. "No forced entry visible," he muttered, "but lights don't turn themselves on." Sarah's voice was tight. "If they're after the journal." "Then we move quietly," finished. "Maintenance entrance through the garage." She nodded. "My grandfather made me choose a place with multiple exits." They slipped through the service corridor, the scent of dust and motor oil heavy in the air. The stairwell echoed faintly as they climbed, their footsteps deliberate, soft. On the third floor, halted, listening. Drawers opening, closing. Someone was searching her apartment. Signaled, silent count to 3. He kicked the door open, weapon raised. "U.S. Navy, hands where I can see them." Sarah followed, adrenaline sharp in her veins. In the bedroom, a tall, lean man in dark clothes dove behind the bed. A silenced pistol flashed in his hand. He didn't fire. Instead, his voice was measured, almost weary. "Commander, I've been expecting you." Grip on his sidearm tightened. "Identify yourself." The man removed his cap and glasses, revealing weathered features and sharp eyes. Sarah's breath caught. She knew that face from the photograph beside her grandfather. "You're Wilson," she whispered. He inclined his head. "Captain Frank Wilson, though I haven't used that name in years." How could a man declared dead for decades be standing in her bedroom, calm, almost relieved to be caught? The quiet hum of the apartment's refrigerator felt deafening against Sarah's pounding heartbeat. Wilson stood slowly, hands raised as kept his pistol trained on him. The lean lines of his frame betrayed both age and discipline, years of moving like a shadow, of staying alive when the world believed him gone. "Drop the gun," ordered. Wilson eased the suppressed cig to the floor, sliding it away with a careful nudge of his boot. His movements were deliberate, precise, no sudden gestures. "I'm not here to hurt anyone," he said evenly. "But we don't have much time." Sarah's breath trembled. "Why were your people attacking the base? Were they your people?" A bitter smile tugged at the corners of Wilson's mouth. "Those weren't my people. If I wanted the data center, you'd never have known I was there. Whoever sent them wanted chaos, wanted to flush something or someone out." Eyes narrowed. "Then why break into her apartment?" Wilson's gaze softened when it found Sarah. "Because James trusted me. He told me about the journal before he died, and now knows it exists. That makes you a target, Miss Miller." The name landed heavy in the room. Sarah replayed the colonel's probing questions in the command center, the too intense way he'd studied her. Thomas appeared in the doorway, weapon still drawn. "Backups on perimeter. Who the hell is this?" "Captain Frank Wilson," said without lowering his aim. "Officially KIA, apparently not." Thomas' face registered a flicker of disbelief before snapping back to professional detachment. "He's coming in for questioning." Wilson shook his head. "If you hand me over to now, you'll never see the journal again, and you'll never learn the truth about Eagle Falls or Somalia." Sarah's chest tightened. The journal, the weight of her grandfather's secrets, lay just feet away behind the baseboard safe. Her fingers itched toward the hidden compartment. "What truth?" she asked quietly. "The kind that got men killed," Wilson replied, "and the kind powerful men will kill again to bury." Studied him for a long beat. The room was heavy with unspoken calculations. Finally, he lowered his weapon slightly, though not completely. "Miller, get the journal." Sarah moved to the closet, knelt, and removed the section of baseboard with steady hands. The safe opened with a soft click. She lifted the weathered wooden box marked "Rangers Lead the Way" and carried it to the bed. Inside, her grandfather's silver star glinted beside old photographs and the leather-bound journal. Wilson's eyes softened at the sight. He kept it all. A flicker of headlights swept the curtains, vehicles outside, glanced through the blinds. 3 SUVs had pulled up silently, men in tactical gear fanning out. "Government plates." "People," muttered. Thomas' voice was tight. "They'll take jurisdiction. They'll take him." Wilson's jaw clenched. "If they get that journal, it disappears forever." Sarah hugged the journal to her chest. The sound of boots on pavement drifted up from below, made a decision in an instant. "Thomas, stall them. Verification of orders, chain of command, anything." Thomas hesitated. "That could cost me." "Then stall them just long enough for us to disappear," said, his voice steel. The FBI agent grimaced but nodded. "I can buy you a couple of minutes." "Roof access," Sarah whispered. "My grandfather made me map every escape route." Wilson allowed himself a faint, grim smile. "James taught you well." They climbed the narrow maintenance ladder to the roof. The cool night air cut sharp against Sarah's flushed cheeks. Across the alley, 8 feet away, another building waited. The gap yawned like a black mouth between them. Sarah went first. Short run, clean jump. She landed, rolled, came up steady, the journal still tight in her pack. Wilson followed, surprisingly agile for his age, grunting softly on impact. Was about to leap when the roof access door burst open behind him. 2 men in tactical gear raised rifles. "Federal agents, freeze." Jumped anyway. Rounds snapped through the air as he hit the next roof hard, rolling to cover behind an AC unit. Bullets smacked concrete where his body had been a heartbeat earlier. "Go," he barked. "Get out of sight." Wilson grabbed Sarah's arm, pulling her toward a maintenance door on the far side. "He's a SEAL. This is his world," he said grimly. "The best thing you can do for him is keep moving." They descended the stairs into a quiet residential hallway. An elderly woman emerged from her apartment, startled. Wilson's transformation was instantaneous. Shoulders relaxed, voice warm. "Sorry to disturb you, ma'am. Maintenance on the roof." She eyed them suspiciously, then shuffled past. Sarah's chest ached. Her entire life had been stable, quiet, A job, a small apartment, memories of Montana. In an instant, it was gone. Outside, they slipped into the shadows of a narrow side street. Distant sirens wailed. Wilson scanned for surveillance cameras for tails. Men will lock this area down fast. We need wheels. Sarah spotted a delivery van idling near a closed restaurant. The driver, a young man scrolling his phone, had left the keys in the ignition. She swallowed hard, guilt flickering. But Wilson was already moving. He slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and motioned her in. As the van rolled through the sleeping city, Sarah hugged the backpack tight. "I need to know what's in this," she said quietly. "You will," Wilson promised. "But right now, knowing too much could get you killed." The dashboard lights painted his face in ghostly blues and greens. He looked older now, more tired, but there was still steel beneath the weariness. "Your grandfather," Wilson said after a moment, "was the best man I ever knew, and he was betrayed." Sarah's throat tightened. "By." "And others. Somalia was a setup, politics over men's lives. James barely made it out. The rest of us," he trailed off, jaw tight. "We were abandoned, written off." The van rattled over a bridge, the city lights flickering on the water below. Sarah's mind replayed fragments of her grandfather's rare admissions, anger muted by whiskey, warnings disguised as bedtime stories. Good men died for nothing. She had been too young to understand. Number flashed on her phone, unknown caller ID blocked. She answered. His voice was low, urgent. "I bought us time, but they know you're gone. Stay dark, Miller. Don't answer unknown numbers, don't go home, and trust no one except me." The line went dead. Wilson glanced at her. He's a good man, but even good men can be cornered by bad systems. They drove in silence for a while, the hum of tires on asphalt filling the space between their thoughts. Sarah stared out the window at the blur of palm trees and neon signs. She was drifting between worlds, the quiet maintenance girl and the warrior her grandfather had trained. She whispered almost to herself, "I didn't ask for this." Wilson's voice was gentle but firm. "Neither did James, but some legacies don't ask your permission." He steered the van off the freeway, down a dark service road that led to an abandoned boatyard. The smell of salt and rust mingled in the cool air. He parked behind a row of derelict fishing vessels. "This will do for a while," he said, cutting the engine. He checked the pistol he'd reclaimed from her apartment floor. "Get some rest if you can. We'll need to move again before sunrise." Sarah sat on the van's floor, backpack in her lap. Her fingers traced the leather cover of the journal. The weight of it was crushing and comforting all at once. She opened it just a crack, enough to glimpse her grandfather's neat, precise handwriting. A single line on the first page caught her eye. "If you're reading this, it means the ghosts have found you." She closed it quickly, heart hammering. Wilson watched her, his expression unreadable. "When you're ready," he said softly, "we'll start with Eagle Falls." The night outside was silent but for the distant crash of waves. In that quiet, Sarah felt the enormity of what lay ahead, the enemies she couldn't yet name, the secrets buried deeper than the ocean floor. She thought of her grandfather's prophecy. "Someday, the skills I'm giving you might make all the difference." She had thought he meant saving a single life on a range, or perhaps proving herself worthy of a rifle. She hadn't imagined this, hunted by powerful men, holding a journal that could crack decades of buried lies. She leaned her head back against the van wall, exhaustion washing over her. For a fleeting moment, she let herself grieve the simplicity she had lost, but under the grief was something steadier, an ember of resolve. She would not be invisible again. Why would a decorated colonel betray his own, yet still walk freely under the flag he once swore to defend? The first blush of dawn smeared pale light across the boatyard, painting the rusted hulls in shades of pink and gray. Sarah Miller stirred awake on the van's cold floor, her neck stiff, her mind groggy but restless. The journal lay beneath her arm like a fragile heartbeat. Wilson sat outside on an overturned crate, his silhouette framed against the faint glow of the horizon, a cigarette ember pulsing like a firefly. She slid the door open, the creak startling in the stillness. "You smoke now?" she asked quietly. He glanced at her, the corner of his mouth twitching. "Only when I need to remember I'm alive." He crushed the cigarette under his boot and nodded toward the distant bay. "We can't linger. Men will widen their net by mid-morning." Sarah climbed out, hugging the backpack to her chest. The salty breeze tangled her hair. "Where do we go?" "Somewhere they won't look," Wilson said. "Somewhere James would have trusted." His gaze softened. "There's a man in the desert, retired Marine named. He was part of Eagle Falls until the brass burned him. He'll know what parts of your grandfather's story are still dangerous." They drove inland, leaving the coast's glittering waters for barren hills and sun-bleached towns. Wilson's hands were steady on the wheel, but his eyes darted to mirrors too often. Sarah watched the journal in her lap, temptation gnawing. Each mile carried not just distance but unanswered questions. Why had pressed so hard about the journal? What secret was worth an armed assault on an American base? By late morning, the van rattled down a forgotten highway flanked by cracked asphalt and tumbleweed. Wilson finally spoke. James believed some secrets weren't the government's to keep. Eagle Falls wasn't a standard op. It was an off-book recovery mission, classified tech, foreign soil, no oversight. Sarah swallowed. "Tech." Wilson nodded. "Prototype optic system, beyond anything public even today. Your grandfather was the only one who mastered it. He used it to pull off impossible shots, shots that saved dozens of lives." His eyes darkened. But someone wanted that tech lost or stolen. Somalia was supposed to erase the evidence. The van jolted over a pothole and Sarah clutched the journal. And was a young intel officer back then. He picked the teams, chose the extraction points. Wilson's voice hardened. He chose the men he could sacrifice. Silence settled, heavy and bitter. Sarah felt anger rise, surprising in its heat. Her grandfather had spent years carrying this weight silently, with only whiskey and an old rifle for company. They reached a cluster of abandoned service stations on the outskirts of the Mojave. A weathered sign for surplus store leaned precariously. Wilson parked around back. "Stay behind me," he murmured. Inside, dust motes swirled through shafts of light. A bell above the door jingled, echoing. A broad-shouldered man with a gray beard and faded Marine Corps tattoo emerged from a back room, shotgun in hand. "Wilson." His voice was rough, like gravel sliding down steel. Wilson said, spreading his hands, "Not here to cause trouble." Sharp eyes shifted to Sarah. "And the girl?" "James Miller's granddaughter," Wilson replied. The shotgun lowered, posture eased. "Ghost eyes blood," he said almost reverently. "Damn, he always said you carry the torch." Sarah stepped forward. "I didn't ask to carry anything." His gaze softened, but he didn't argue. He led them into a back room cluttered with maps, radios, and dusty file boxes. "You brought the journal." Sarah hesitated, then unzipped her pack. The journal looked small in her hands, fragile against the weight of the moment. Flipped through pages quickly, stopping at a photograph tucked between entries. Ghost Eye and Wilson flanking a younger. They were grinning, beers in hand. Tapped the photo. "Before the lies." He pointed to a specific entry, coordinates, dates, and a scrawled note. "If they ever come for this, trust only Wilson." Exhaled slowly. "That this is a storage cache." James didn't trust command to destroy the prototype optics. He hid it. Been hunting it ever since. Sarah's pulse quickened. "Then thinks I know where it is." Nodded grimly. "And he'll kill to make sure you can't find it first." Wilson's jaw tightened. "We need to get to that cache before he does." Pulled a battered desert map from a drawer. He stashed it in an old ranger training ground out past Furnace Creek. But that place isn't just abandoned, it's booby-trapped. Ghost Eye knew how to make a place disappear. Outside, a low rumble grew. A convoy of SUVs approaching, faint dust trails against the sky. Cursed. They're fast. Sarah's heart leapt. Wilson scanned the windows. Men, they tracked us. Yanked open a trapdoor in the floor. Old Prohibition tunnel leads to the arroyo behind the ridge. Go. They scrambled into the narrow passage, darkness swallowing them. The sound of boots and shouted orders echoed above as the SUVs skidded to a halt. Wilson flicked on a small flashlight, the beam slicing through dust and cobwebs. Sarah's breath was ragged as they crawled. Every scrape of her boots seemed loud enough to give them away. The tunnel ended in a collapsed section of desert brush. Wilson pushed it aside, revealing the endless Mojave stretching under a brutal sun. "Run the dry wash," whispered. "I'll stall them." "No," Sarah began, but firm look silenced her. "Ghost Eye saved my life once. This is how I repay it." Gunfire cracked behind them. His voice bellowed curses and defiance. Wilson grabbed Sarah's hand, pulling her into the wash. Sand crunched under their boots, sun beating mercilessly down. Minutes turned into aching stretches of time. The gunfire faded. Only the wind's low howl and their ragged breaths remained. Finally, they paused beneath an overhang of rock. Sarah leaned against the stone, sweat streaking her dusty face. Her mind reeled, risking his life. Betrayal, the hidden cache that her grandfather had trusted her to protect. Anger burned hotter now, mingling with grief. He carried this burden alone to keep me safe, and I never even knew. Wilson crouched beside her, scanning the horizon. "You okay?" She nodded stiffly, "Just processing." He studied her face. "James trained you for this. Maybe not these exact circumstances, but he trained you to stand when everything falls apart." Sarah stared out at the desert expanse, her resolve hardening like sun-baked clay. "Then we find the cache. We expose." Wilson gave a single nod. Ghost Eye would be proud. They trekked through the desert for hours, heat shimmering on the horizon. At dusk, they reached an abandoned ranger outpost, a scattering of decaying buildings half swallowed by sand. Faded paint on a crumbling wall still bore the motto, "Rangers lead the way." Inside the main barracks, Wilson uncovered a concealed panel beneath a rotted bunk. Beneath it lay a rusted metal case, its lock etched with Ghost Eye's initials. Sarah knelt, tracing the letters with her fingertips, feeling the presence of her grandfather in the dry air. Wilson handed her a small key from his dog tags. "James gave me this, said only his blood should open it." The lock clicked open. Inside, nestled in oiled cloth, was a sleek optic unlike anything Sarah had seen, compact, elegant, impossibly advanced. Alongside it, a flash drive and a single Polaroid. Ghost Eye and a young Wilson standing in front of a burning helicopter, grim but resolute. Sarah exhaled shakily. "This is what they're willing to kill for." Wilson's gaze was hard. "And what your grandfather died to keep hidden." The desert night deepened around them, stars spilling across the sky like shattered glass. Sarah held the optic to the starlight, feeling the weight of her grandfather's trust settle into her bones. She wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't just a girl sweeping brass at a range. Somewhere out there, men were regrouping, hunting. But for the first time, Sarah didn't feel hunted. She felt ready. She whispered a promise to the desert wind, to Ghost Eye's memory, to herself. "I'll finish what you started." How far would a man go to erase the past, and how far would a granddaughter go to honor it? The desert night was bitter now, the stars cold and sharp against the black. Sarah Miller crouched by the broken barracks window, her breath a soft plume in the chill. Wilson sat against a wall, checking the flash drive they'd recovered from Ghost Eye's cache on a rugged field tablet. The screen flickered to life, casting faint light over his lined face. "This isn't just technical schematics," Wilson muttered. "There's proof of unauthorized missions, names, dates. Black sites they swore didn't exist." He glanced at her. "We'll burn the world to keep this buried." Sarah's hands tightened around the advanced optic, its smooth casing cool under her fingers. The weight of it felt heavier than any rifle. Then we have to make it public. Wilson's mouth was a grim line. Easier said than done. Has reach. He'll label us traitors before he lets this see daylight. A low rumble broke the silence, a distant engine, then another. Headlights winked on the horizon, sweeping the desert floor. Wilson killed the tablet's screen. They're coming. He guided her through the shadows to a rusted communications shack. We hold them off long enough to slip through the east ridge. Once we hit the canyon, their vehicles can't follow. Sarah nodded, adrenaline tightening her chest, but fear whispered under the edges. This wasn't a controlled range or a rescue by chance. This was a hunt. She gripped the M110 Wilson had recovered from the van, the rifle an old friend now. The first SUV crested a dune, its beams slicing the darkness. A voice over a loudspeaker crackled, distorted but clear. "Miller, Wilson, surrender now and maybe you live." Wilson's expression was unreadable. "They're trying to rattle us." Sarah's jaw set. "It's working a little." A single suppressed round hissed through the night, striking the sand inches from her boots. She flinched, heartbeat hammering. Wilson yanked her down behind a dune. "Move on my mark." The next seconds were a blur, Wilson firing short, precise bursts to draw attention, Sarah crawling low under the beam's sweep. Bullets snapped over their heads, thudding into the earth. She felt sand spray her cheek, hot and stinging. Her breaths came shallow, quick, but her grandfather's voice whispered again, "Steady. Breathe through the fear. Fear is only proof you're still alive." They reached the ridge as a spotlight cut across their path. Sarah froze, then sighted through her scope. One breath, two, three, then she squeezed. The spotlight shattered, plunging the ridge into darkness. The sudden blackness gave them seconds to vanish down the narrow canyon path. Their boots skidded on loose rock as they descended. Behind them, shouts echoed, men scrambling to regroup. The canyon walls closed in, the path twisting through pale sandstone like a vein carved by time. The moon hung high, its silver light barely reaching the canyon floor. Wilson led them to a small alcove crouching low. "We need a contact on the inside," he said quietly. "Someone can't control." Sarah thought of Commander, the way he'd believed her at the range, the way he'd told her to trust him. She whispered. Wilson nodded, "But contacting him risks a trace." Sarah swallowed. "He risked his career for me. If we don't reach out, we're dead anyway." Wilson weighed her words, then pulled a satellite phone from his pack. The device looked battered but reliable. "Short and coded," he said. "No direct names." Sarah took the phone, hesitating before dialing. The line clicked, static hissed. Then a voice, calm, low, unmistakable, "Go ahead." She closed her eyes briefly. "The desert holds the ghosts. We're heading east." A pause, then reply. "Understood. Avoid the highway. Meet me where the river bends." The line went dead. Sarah handed the phone back. Her hands trembled, not from fear this time, but from a strange, fragile hope. By dawn, the canyon opened into a dry riverbed. A battered jeep sat camouflaged under brush. Leaned against it, his rifle slung, eyes scanning the horizon. Relief flickered in his expression when he saw them. "You're lucky I still have friends in satellite ops," he said. "Sweep is wide. They're painting you as rogue actors, claiming you stole sensitive tech." Sarah's chest tightened, "And people will believe them." "Most will," admitted, "but not everyone." His gaze flicked to Wilson. "You look older than your file photo." Wilson snorted. "And you look too young to be this cynical." Face sobered. "We can't sit still. I know a pilot who owes me a favor to a safe house across the border, but it's a narrow window. We'll have to cross open ground." They drove the jeep hard across the desert, wind whipping their hair, engines whining over cracked earth. Sarah kept the optic and journal close, every bump in the road a reminder of their fragile advantage. Her thoughts flickered, her grandfather teaching her to track elk in snow, his laughter when she missed a shot, his silence when memories of Somalia clouded his eyes. She whispered under her breath, "I'm trying, Grandpa." The horizon shimmered with heat. A lone prop plane waited on a dirt strip ahead, its fuselage sun-bleached, wings patched with mismatched metal. A woman in aviator sunglasses leaned casually against the wing, chewing gum. "Maria Torres," said as they approached, "best bush pilot in 3 continents." Torres eyed Sarah and Wilson, raising an eyebrow. "You bring me ghosts and a scandal, must be Tuesday." Wilson smirked faintly. "You're still charging double for emergencies." "Triple when the DIA's hunting you," she replied, but her tone softened. "Get aboard." As they loaded the plane, an engine growl thundered across the sky, helicopters cresting the horizon. Dust plumes marked armored vehicles closing fast. Men had found them. Torres fired up the prop, the plane shuddering with life. "We don't have runway for a proper takeoff," she warned. "Hold on." The plane lurched forward, rattling down the dirt strip as tracer rounds streaked past. Sarah clutched the journal, heart hammering. A bullet punched through the fuselage, sunlight lancing through the new hole. Wilson fired from the open door, controlled bursts keeping the pursuers at bay. Leaned out with his carbine, suppressing fire with calm precision. The plane's nose lifted unevenly, tires bouncing on rough ground. Another volley of rounds hissed past. Then airborne. The desert fell away beneath them, the vehicles shrinking to toy-sized dots. The pursuing helicopters hesitated, then banked away, outpaced by Tor's desperate climb. Inside the plane, silence returned, broken only by the engine's drone. Sarah exhaled shakily, adrenaline leaving her limbs weak. She glanced at Wilson, his jaw tight, eyes scanning the horizon even now. Slid beside her, "You okay?" She nodded, though her voice trembled. "I don't know what okay is anymore." He gave a small, almost sad smile. "Welcome to our world." Torres banked the plane eastward, the sun rising ahead, spilling gold across the endless sky. Sarah looked out the window at the vastness stretching below, the desert where ghosts whispered, the base where she had once been invisible, the country she no longer fully trusted. She thought of somewhere far behind them, spinning lies, tightening his net. And she thought of her grandfather, somewhere beyond the stars, trusting her to carry a truth that men like feared. As the plane leveled out, Sarah reached for the journal. She opened it again, this time reading past the first line. Her grandfather's handwriting curved across the page. "If you're here, the world is darker than I hoped. But don't let their darkness swallow your light." The words anchored her. She wasn't ready to break, not yet. How could the sky feel so wide and safe, yet danger be just a heartbeat behind? The small prop plane droned steadily east, its patched fuselage creaking in the morning air. Sarah Miller pressed her forehead to the window, watching the desert fade into rugged foothills. Her fingers traced the spine of her grandfather's journal as if its leather could anchor her to something unshakable. Wilson sat opposite her, eyes closed but alert, a soldier's rest. Checked a map, the glow of his tablet faint against the cabin's dim light. Torres piloted with casual confidence, her sunglasses flashing reflections of the rising sun. For a few stolen minutes, Sarah felt the illusion of escape. Then the radio crackled, a clipped male voice. "Unidentified aircraft, this is restricted airspace. Alter course or prepare to be intercepted." Torres muttered a curse. "His reach is faster than I thought." Leaned forward, "Keep us low, terrain masking." The plane dipped sharply, hugging the ridges. Loose gear clattered. Sarah's stomach lurched, her pulse surging. Through the window, distant shapes, jets sliced the sky like silver knives. Torres guided the plane through a winding canyon, its walls a blur of shadow. Static flared again. Another warning. Then a colder voice. "Last chance. Divert or be engaged." Keyed the mic. "This is Sierra Echo, emergency medical, responding to a critical." The voice returned flat. "Negative, verify authorization." Torres whispered, They're stalling, buying time to vector interceptors. Wilson opened a compartment under his seat, producing a flare gun and a small EMP device, improvised but effective. James showed me a trick for moments like this. He pointed to a narrow tributary canyon ahead. There's an old mining shaft near that bend. We can ditch the plane, scramble through, and lose them. Torres grimaced. Ditching mid-flight isn't on my menu. Then trust a ghost, Wilson said, strapping on a parachute. He handed another to Sarah. Her throat tightened. She'd shot under fire and run through tunnels, but this, jumping into a maze of rock and shadow, set every nerve alight. Met her gaze. You can do this. His voice was steady, a tether in chaos. She nodded once, hands trembling as she secured the harness. Torres leveled the plane just long enough. Go. Wind screamed as Sarah leapt. The world flipped, sky, canyon, shards of light, before the parachute yanked her upright. She descended fast, canyon walls rushing past, the smell of dust and sun-warmed stone filling her senses. Her boots hit gravel hard. She rolled, sand scraping her cheek. Above, the plane banked sharply, Torres luring the jets away, her bravery a streak of defiance against the sky. Wilson landed nearby, already moving. Touched down moments later, graceful despite the chaos. They unclipped their chutes, stashing them under rocks. The canyon was silent now except for distant jet engines fatting. The heat of the day was building quickly, pressing down like a weight. Wilson checked his compass. There's a network of shafts 2 clicks east. Men can't follow on foot fast enough if we get inside. They jogged through the twisting gorge, boots crunching over gravel. Sarah's lungs burned, but she kept pace. Sweat soaked her shirt, dust streaked her face. Still, she clutched the journal, unwilling to let it leave her grasp. As they neared the shaft, slowed. We'll need light. He handed Sarah a small from his pack. The mine entrance yawned like a mouth carved into the earth, the smell of rust and old stone wafting out. Inside, darkness swallowed them. Their lights cast thin cones, revealing wooden supports slick with age. The air was cool but stale. Sarah's heartbeat echoed in her ears. Halfway through a narrow tunnel, a sound froze her mid-step, a pebble skittering behind them. Wilson turned, weapon ready. Silence. Then a voice, low and mocking, floated through the dark. You run well for ghosts. Men had followed. Gestured silently, split roots. He motioned Sarah to keep moving, then melted into shadow. Wilson stayed close behind her. The tunnel forked ahead. Sarah ducked left, weaving through collapsed beams. Voices chased them, closer now. They burst into a wide chamber where an old mining cart lay overturned. Sarah's hands trembled as she raised her rifle. She could hear her grandfather's calm. Control the breath. Let the shot break itself. 2 armed men appeared in the entrance. She fired, a sharp crack that echoed like thunder underground. One man dropped. The other dove for cover, firing blindly. Sparks danced off rock. Wilson moved like water, flanking, a quick burst ending the threat. Their footsteps thundered deeper into the mine until faint daylight glimmered ahead. They emerged onto a high desert plateau, wind whipping their hair. The land stretched endless and unforgiving. Joined them moments later, his face streaked with dust. We're clear for now, he said, but worry flickered in his eyes. Torres is out there alone. She bought us time. Sarah's chest ached. She knew the risk. Wilson scanned the horizon. She'll find her way. That woman survived worse. They trekked across the plateau until dusk painted the rocks crimson. The optic in Sarah's pack felt heavier with every step, a promise and a curse. Finally, they reached a hidden campsite beneath an overhang. A small fire crackled, its glow soft against the encroaching dark. Sat beside her, silent for a long while. Finally, he said, when this is over, if it ever is, you'll need to decide what kind of life you want. Ghost Eye chose the shadows to protect the people he loved. That choice cost him everything. Sarah stared into the flames, their light flickering in her eyes. He didn't regret saving people. He regretted the silence afterward. Wilson handed her a canteen. Your grandfather believed truth has weight. He passed that weight to you. Sarah turned the journal in her hands. It feels heavier than I am. Wilson's gaze softened. That's because it's more than paper. It's men's lives. It's the line between loyalty and conscience. The wind howled softly through the rocks, carrying with it the chill of night and the ghosts of old promises. Sarah thought of the base, the woman who had been invisible there, sweeping brass while elite soldiers ignored her. That woman was gone. She whispered to the fire, almost a prayer, I won't run from this. Above them, the stars seemed closer than before, as if the universe itself leaned in to listen. What would it cost to tell the truth, her future, her freedom, or the lives of those who had already risked everything? Dawn crept over the desert plateau, painting the rocks in rose and amber. Sarah Miller sat awake beside the dying embers of the fire, the journal open on her knees. She traced her grandfather's handwriting with a fingertip, as if she could feel the echo of his voice through the ink. Wilson and Still slept lightly, their rifles within reach even in dreams. Her eyes lingered on a passage she hadn't yet read aloud. If you're here, trust is a fragile currency. Spend it wisely. The man who laughs with you at sunset might sell you at dawn. She closed the journal, heart tightening. The weight of betrayal lingered like a bitter taste, had been in the photo with her grandfather once, smiling, trusted. That smile now seemed monstrous. The wind shifted, carrying distant rotor noise. Sat up instantly, scanning the horizon. Wilson followed, tension etched in the lines of his face. Helicopter said, fast mover, not a rescue bird. Sarah's stomach nodded, they found us. Wilson checked the optic and flash drive in her pack. Then we move before they can vector ground teams. They hiked east, moving across jagged terrain that would slow vehicles. The sun climbed higher, its heat pressing down like an invisible hand. Sarah's legs burned, her throat dry, but she kept pace, silent determination in every step. By midday, they reached a desolate truck stop on the edge of a dry basin, abandoned long ago, its cracked sign swaying in the breeze. Led them into the shell of a diner, its windows shattered, booths coated in dust. He unrolled a map across a table. We can't run forever, he said quietly. If control's the narrative, no one will believe us. But if we can get this data to someone outside his reach, someone with a voice too loud to silence. Wilson nodded slowly. A journalist, a senator with nothing to lose. Jaw tightened. I know a war correspondent, Lena Cross. She's burned people before, she won't back down. Sarah's pulse quickened. How do we reach her? She's embedded with a unit near the border, said. We'd need a secure line or better, get to her ourselves. Wilson pointed to a route on the map, a winding path through canyons to a disused airstrip. If Torres survived, she might head there. She'd know we'd need an exit. A sound outside snapped their attention, a car door closing softly, motioned for silence. Sarah's heartbeat roared in her ears. Through a broken window, she glimpsed a shadow slipping past a gas pump. Wilson signaled, flank left. Sarah followed, her breath shallow. Around the corner of the diner, a figure stepped into view, hands raised, eyes wide. It was Maria Torres. Her flight suit was torn, streaked with dust and blood. Don't shoot, she said, voice hoarse. They clipped my wing, had to ditch near the ridge. I've been dodging patrols all night. Relief loosened Sarah's chest. Torres managed a faint smile. Miss me. Wilson lowered his weapon, shaking his head. You're impossible. But Torres' expression darkened. They're tightening the noose. Broadcasting that you killed federal agents at. He's painting you as domestic terrorists. Sarah felt the room tilt slightly. People will believe him. Some will, Torres said. But some remember Ghost Eye, and some remember lies. They moved quickly after that, piling into an old pickup Torres had. Dust plumed behind them as they barreled across open ground, heading for the airstrip. The truck rattled, its engine groaning. Every distant dust cloud on the horizon looked like an approaching convoy. As evening bled into the sky, they reached the airstrip, a cracked runway surrounded by skeletal hangars. The place seemed abandoned, but fresh tire tracks cut through the dust. Wilson raised his rifle, scanning. "Could be friend or foe," said quietly. They advanced cautiously. A hangar door creaked open, revealing a gaunt man in desert fatigues with kind eyes. "Thought you might come," he said. "Torres called ahead before she lost comms. Name's ex-ranger. I keep this place off the books." Led them inside, where a battered communications rig hummed faintly. Handed him the flash drive. "We need this transmitted to someone who can blow the lid off's operation." Slid the drive into a terminal, his brows furrowed as he scanned the files. "This is dynamite, but sending it from here, if they're monitoring, they'll trace it." Sarah stepped forward. "Then don't send it, copy it. Hide a piece somewhere they'd never think to look." Glanced at her, impressed. "You've got ghost eyes brain, kid." Wilson placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder. "She's more than his shadow." They worked quickly, splitting the data onto multiple encrypted drives. Torres plotted a new flight path, rigged the hangar doors with improvised charges, just in case. But as they prepared to leave, the distant whine of engines grew louder. Trucks, lots of them, swore under his breath. "They're here." The first headlights flared against the desert dark. Shadows spilled across the cracked runway. Sarah's hands tightened on her rifle. Her fear was a quiet, steady thing now, less a tremor, more a companion. Wilson crouched beside her. "Remember what James taught us, they expect panic. Give them patience instead." The first truck skidded to a halt. Men spilled out, their movements crisp and professional. His voice boomed through a loudspeaker. "End this now, Miller. Hand over the optic and the journal, and I might let your friends walk." Sarah's stomach knotted, but she stepped forward slightly, her voice carrying clear across the airstrip. "You killed men who trusted you. You burned the truth. I won't give you anything." Laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "You don't understand the game you're in." Whispered, "Stall him." Sarah raised her voice again. "No, I understand it too well. You think the world forgets, but ghosts remember." For a heartbeat, the desert held its breath. Then headlights flared brighter, engines roared, and the first volley of gunfire split the night. Wilson returned fire, precise and efficient. Barked orders, his voice calm amid chaos. Torres slid behind a stack of barrels, her pistol snapping sharp reports. Sarah dropped prone, the optic steady against her shoulder. Her world narrowed to targets, angles, breaths. The airstrip became a storm of dust, sparks, and shouted commands. And somewhere in the melee, Sarah felt a strange clarity. Every choice her grandfather had made, every warning had led to this moment. Not for glory, not for revenge, but for truth. She whispered to herself as she lined up her next shot, "For you, Grandpa, for all of them." What does victory look like when it's paid for with silence, scars, and the ghosts who never made it home? The airstrip was a war zone of dust and muzzle flashes, tracer fire carving brief arcs of light across the dark desert. Sarah Miller stayed prone, cheek pressed to the optic, her breaths measured. Every shot she took felt like an echo of her grandfather, precise, patient, deliberate. Each trigger squeeze was a promise kept. Moved like a shadow, coordinating fields of fire, his voice low but steady. "Wilson, east flank. Torres, suppress that ridge." Wilson obeyed, his bursts precise, cutting down two men attempting a flanking maneuver. Torres ducked behind a half-collapsed barrel, her pistol barking defiance even as sparks showered around her. Men advanced in disciplined formations, headlights flooding the runway. Himself stood near a Humvee, watching through binoculars, calm, calculating, certain the night would end his way. Sarah whispered under her breath, "Not tonight." She adjusted for wind and distance, the optics reticle settling on a gunner preparing to bring up heavier firepower. She squeezed, the man crumpled, his weapon clattering silent. But for every hostile she dropped, two more pressed forward. A exploded near, sending him sprawling. Sarah's stomach clenched. Wilson lunged, dragging behind a concrete slab as bullets shredded the air where he'd been. The blast left momentarily dazed, blood at his temple. "We can't hold forever," Torres shouted over the roar. Wilson glanced at Sarah. "We don't need forever, just long enough." The plan unfolded in seconds, triggered the charges had set earlier. A thunderclap ripped through the night as the hangar doors blew outward, debris and dust billowing. The sudden chaos shattered S's line of advance. Men stumbled, headlights flickered. "Now," Wilson barked. Sarah grabbed the optic, and the journal, sprinting low across the cracked runway toward the jeep they'd hidden beyond the hangars. Staggered to his feet, weapon firing controlled bursts despite the blood on his face. Torres covered their retreat, her pistol a staccato heartbeat in the storm. They piled into the jeep, engine roaring. Tires screamed against the asphalt as they tore across the open ground, bullets sparking on the frame. Dust swallowed them, the airstrip shrinking behind into a chaos of light and gunfire. His voice crackled through a radio they'd left on the floor. "They won't get far." But the desert has its own loyalties. The jeep skidded through gullies and ravines that no convoy could follow at speed. After a tense half-hour of pursuit, the distant engines faded. Wilson didn't slow. Only when the stars were high and the desert silent again did he ease the jeep to a stop under a rocky overhang. The four of them sat in heavy silence, breaths ragged. Torres finally broke it with a strained laugh. "We're all insane." Wiped the blood from his temple, wincing. "Welcome to the club." Sarah sat clutching the journal in her lap, her hands trembling. The adrenaline crash was brutal, her body ached, her chest tight. She thought of Ghost Eye, of Montana mornings, of the frost on their rifles. He'd warned her of the cost of truth. Now she understood. Wilson turned in his seat, his voice quieter. "Won't stop. He'll tighten the story. By tomorrow we'll be on every." Nodded grimly. "We need Cross. If she runs this story first, narrative cracks." Torres tapped the GPS. "There's a border crossing 2 hours east. After that, we can reach her unit by dawn." The jeep rattled over rough ground, stars wheeling silently overhead. Sarah's thoughts drifted, flashes of faces from the range, of standing defiantly in that tunnel, of Torres diving into the sky to buy them seconds. All of them risking pieces of themselves for a truth no one had asked them to fight for. By pre-dawn light, they reached a remote outpost where Cross's convoy had camped. A single fire burned low. Figures stirred as they approached. A woman with a weather-lined face and steady eyes stepped forward, laying across. Held out the flash drive. "Sly's Eagle Falls, Somalia, the cache." Cross scanned their faces, lingering on Sarah. "Ghost Eye's granddaughter," she said softly. "I heard whispers you existed." Sarah felt exposed beneath Cross's searching gaze. "I didn't want to exist like this." Cross nodded once, the faintest respect in her expression. Truth rarely chooses its messengers kindly. They spent the next hour transferring files, recounting what they'd seen. Cross's team fragments against their own intel, her jaw tightening with each confirmation. "This will ruin," she murmured. "But he'll strike first. I'll need to go public immediately." Wilson looked at Sarah. "When this airs, they'll paint you worse than him." Sarah's voice was soft but steady. "Let them. My grandfather believed the truth was worth any price. I believe him now." Cross's broadcast went live at dawn. Satellite uplinks flared. Screens lit up in distant cities. The story Eagle Falls, Somalia's betrayal, the attack on spilled into the world. And for a moment the desert was utterly still, as if even the earth held its breath. By mid-morning, chaos erupted across the networks. Its official statements were defensive, brittle. Old allies began to distance themselves. Soldiers who'd served under Ghost Eye started speaking quietly to reporters. The story was no longer his to control. Sarah watched the sun rise over the horizon, the journal in her hands. It felt lighter somehow, not because its weight had lessened, but because she no longer carried it alone. Wilson sat beside her, shoulders slumping for the first time in hours. Tors and shared a rare, quiet laugh as they sipped bitter coffee. Yet under the fragile relief, Sarah knew the fight wasn't over, would disappear or someone else would pick up his game. Power didn't surrender easily, but she also knew something deeper. The ghosts had been heard. She walked a few paces away, letting the morning wind wash the dust and blood from her thoughts. She imagined her grandfather standing there, hands in his jacket pockets, giving her that small, proud nod he used to reserve for perfect shots. She whispered to the horizon, "I hope I made you proud." The desert answered only with silence, but it was a silence that felt like approval. Approached, his voice low, "You changed more than you realize." Sarah turned, a small, tired smile flickering. "So did you." He glanced at the journal. "What will you do now?" She looked at the rising sun, at the endless sky. "I'll go back to the range someday, but not as the invisible girl sweeping brass. I'll go back as myself." Wilson stepped closer, his tone wry. "The world knows Ghost Eye's granddaughter now. You won't ever be invisible again." Tors called out from the fire, teasing, "Don't worry, kid, you'll get used to the whispers." Sarah laughed softly, a sound fragile but genuine. It felt strange on her lips after days of running, but it carried something her grandfather had always said she'd need most: hope. As the sun climbed higher, they packed their gear, ready to move again. They didn't know where the next safe place would be or how long's reach might still stretch, but they knew who they were now and what they stood for. Sarah tucked the journal back into her pack, feeling its edges press against her spine like a steadying hand. She glanced once more at the desert expanse, at the wide, unbroken sky. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And beneath that rising sun, Sarah Miller walked forward, no longer a ghost, but a name the world would remember.